meeting to order of the Senate State Government Finance Policy and Elections Committee, today being Tuesday, February 22nd, 2021. Welcome members and the public to this session of the State Government Committee. And so we have a good agenda for today that I think you will find interesting. I think we're all getting used to the rules of voting. Be sure to anticipate when the time comes close, and I'll try to pause also to give you time to get on camera and off mute if there's a roll call vote or if there is a voice vote. Either way, to be sure to be aware when we are going ahead and heading towards that direction, that you do be prepared for that. With that, we'll go ahead and welcome Senator Rosen to the committee. Appreciate your being here, Senator Rosen. And I will move Senate File 8 for Senator Rosen. And Senator Rosen, I understand you also have an author's amendment, the A3 amendment. And I will go ahead and move the A3 amendment to Senate File 8. This is an author's amendment to get it in the shape that she would like as an author. And she will explain all of this as soon as we apply the A3 amendment. So all those in favor of the A3 amendment to Senate File 8, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion prevails and is adopted. So Senator Rosen, Senate File 8 as amended is ready for you to present your bill. Please proceed, Senator Rosen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's very nice to be in front of your committee again. My apologies, I do have a jackhammer right outside my window, so hopefully you can hear me just fine. But Senate File 8 requires all the federal funds received for COVID-19 purposes be spent pursuant to a direct appropriation by law, which basically means the legislature would be involved in this appropriation. The A3 amendment, Madam Chair, it deals with what we passed in the 7th Special Session Law, Chapter 2, Article 7, Section 1, that captures any federal funds that come to the state between December 17th, the day following the final enactment, and June 30th of 2021, and uses those funds to offset general fund appropriations in the act with the federal funds. This was Senator Pratt's bill, and it dealt with unemployment insurance, the education aid, some offsets for bars and restaurants. And basically we're saying that the Senate File 8 does not apply to Special Session 7. That's where the commissioner was using federal funds to offset the general fund. And we wanted to make sure that that is intact in Chapter 2. And then also, Madam Chair, we do have an effective date change on the Senate File 8 to June 30th of 2022 on line 8.
Thank you, Senator Rosen. Do you have other remarks, or shall I go to member
absolutely. Questions? I just wanted to make sure that there was no questions on that A3 amendment. That cleans it up really well. Under current law, the federal funds for COVID-19 are deposited into the state treasury and subject to a review process by the LAC, which is the Legislative Advisory Commission, which comprises of the majority leader, the finance chair, and then the appropriate budget chair. But I want to remind members, this is, I feel, after using it for almost a year now, there's no minority voices on these appropriations. It's strictly just yay or a nay. No ability to change the allocation. We can stop the allocation for just a short period until we're out of session. And more importantly, there's no public voice. The legislature needs to be at the table, especially now that we have been in session. We need to be at the table. And I do feel that since we had the governor's executive orders, we were at the Capitol in session every month, every 30 days, we should have a much stronger voice on these appropriations that are going out for COVID-19. And Madam Chair, we are working on a bill to adjust the LAC process. It's a statute that's been in place and has not been adjusted since the late 70s. So it is very antiquated. And as I said, I feel it's very clunky. This is again, I really feel like the legislature was created and elected to listen and react to the concerns of the public and to make these corrections and these appropriations. So that therefore that is the reason for Senate File 8, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Rosen. I'd also say that you have very strong constitutional standing. Be nice to recognize also the legislature and the spending, but constitutionally that is required to originate with the legislature. So especially when we're talking about such large amounts of money, I think the governor would also benefit from the voices of 201 legislators in that process as well that listen to all of Minnesota. So thank you, Senator Rosen. Members, any of the rest of you have comments, questions? Senator Clausen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Over the last 2 years, prior to the 2020 election, we had considerable discussion about the HAVA funds and distributing those throughout the state of Minnesota. I think we were actually the last state that actually distributed those funds, and I think that discussion took place over 17 months. My question for Senator Rosen would be, based upon your bill, would this type of a situation be prevented, where one group could block the distributing of federal funds, similarly that was done in the HAVA situation?
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Senator Rosen.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Senator Clausen. And I will defer some comments to the chair because she's directly involved in this discussion. But the LAC, as it currently stands, Senator Clausen, we can, one person, and it's a majority, it's not the minority. There is no minority voices on the Legislative Advisory Commission, which is, I find kind of amazing, can say no to an appropriation. We can't change that appropriation. And then there is the opportunity for 20 days before the third deadline, the governor can make it an urgency designation. But then when the session is over, the middle of May or whenever it happens, that money goes out anyway. There is no ability to change that appropriation. So all I'm saying is that the legislature should be able to adjust those appropriations and make sure that there is, as the chair said, 201 voices of the public saying that appropriation is correct or appropriate for COVID-19. It needs to have another set of eyes and many eyes on these tremendous funds. $3.167 billion are coming in this round, and who knows if there's going to be another $1 trillion bill or a $600 billion bill. We don't know, but there's more money coming to the state. And I just feel that this needs to have another set of eyes. I really don't know. I will defer Senator Clausen to the chair on the HAVA appropriation. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Rosen. And so, Senator Clausen, I'll respond to that, or do you have another question?
Yes, Madam Chair, I do. I'm not sure I got an answer. My question was...
Senator Clausen, I will give an answer, as I said. I was just deferring to you as a courtesy to give you an opportunity if you had another question for Senator Rosen. But in regards to the HAVA funds that you mentioned, I will respond to that. I just wanted to allow you and Senator Rosen to complete it first.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Madam Chair. And so again, my question was, would Senator Rosen's bill prevent the blocking of funds or delaying of funds? Would it prevent that?
Madam Chair,
Senator Rosen,
this bill would put a pause on all federal funding unless it was directly appropriated, for sure.
Okay.
Thank you, Senator Rosen. So in regards to the HAVA funds, let's go back in history a bit because I was directly involved. And there was no block. There was an offer for the initial part of the funds that were said were needed right away. The offer was given to them, it was proceeded through, And that money was made available, but the attitude seemed to be one of, we want all the money unrestricted to do what we want. And so there was that kind of issue. Negotiations means you work together and you come to compromise. And so I would hope that as we eventually did, there was compromise, the funds were released, they were timely, they were given to the proper direction and the needs that were there. So I think we did a good job to the legislature in the long run. And the legislature does add value to those things, and we appreciate that contribution that is unique to the legislature. So with that, members, any other questions for Senator Rosen? Senator Carlson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I would have the same concern that there is the opportunity to hold up funds, and these are emergency funds, and they need to be used or activated quickly, just like if there was a major environmental disaster. We can't wait. And we probably do have a different perspective on the HAVA funds, but just erasing that and just saying that, hey, we need to have quick action, and that it looks like there's a mechanism here to hold up funds that need to be released as an emergency. And going back a little bit, I don't think it's fair to say that there are no other voices, and the commission that approves these funds are elected officials. They have offices that they need to represent as well. And I think that we've had many meetings over the days here that work on what these funds should be used for and how they should be allocated. And I think we all remember that a lot of things changed back in May when we had the first allocation from the way that it was first proposed, that I think everybody bipartisanly thought it was not fair. And so we did work on a way to make it more fair across the state. And there were requirements coming from the federal government, for instance, on the counties that had or the cities that had the large populations, and we managed to make adjustments for that. So I think that there is really no problem I see with having the number of people, and there was a large number of people involved in helping make these decisions and getting the funds out fast. But I do have very big concern if there is a mechanism that would serve to block funds that would need to be distributed as fast as possible. That's the very definition of an emergency, and we do still have an emergency.
Thank you, Senator Carlson and Senator Rosen.
Thank you, and thank you, Senator Carlson. I hope you don't think, but perhaps there is a misconception here. It's not to block the funds. We're not blocking. We are inserting our voice in how the funds should be appropriated. We put a pause on it until the legislature can have their voice, and the legislature, of course, speaks for the public. I can honestly say in Finance Committee, there are federal funds coming in, and I'm not sure in all those departments who is making the decision and how they determined how much money of those federal funds go where to which, how. I have no clue, and it's impossible to get an answer right now. The legislature can react quickly. We showed that last spring when we were the first out of the gate, the Senate, to propose $20 million to react to COVID. And then another 150, and then another 200. We reacted very, very quickly. So we can do this in a pandemic. We've shown that ability to exercise cooperation and join hands and say, we have a problem, we need to fund this. We've done that. So this is just a matter of a tremendous amount of money. Over $5 billion will have gone through the governor's office and the agencies, and we have no ability to say where it should be spent. How did you spend it? Give me some guidelines, And I feel that very troubling that the legislature has basically been boxed out and doesn't have a say, especially now that we are in session and this is what we do. The legislature appropriates money. That's what we do, not the governor's office, not the agency. We're the ones that do this. So this is just exercising our right and the rights of all the people through Minnesota who elected us to come here to make sure that that money is being spent appropriately.
Thank you, Senator Rosen. Senator Pratt.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Senator Rosen, just to follow up on some of the questions, if I understood your testimony correctly, that currently we have the ability to stop those funds for a period of time, and then they are automatically released. And I agree with you. The legislature has moved quickly, not only with the items that you talked about, but just even in the Jobs Committee, we put forth unemployment insurance reform, workers' compensation insurance reform, and 3 different loan and grant programs to small businesses that were impacted in very short order. So I do agree with you that we can be nimble, but it seems like the concern vis-a-vis, what happened with HAVA is not exactly an apples to apples comparison, because as you said, we already have the ability to stop those funds, but this gives the legislature a greater voice and more flexibility to work with the governor. Is that a fair summary of the bill?
Senator Rosen.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Senator Pratt. Yes, that's a summary of the bill. But I will just make one correction. We can pause the funds, the federal funds. We cannot stop them. They will go out as the executive branch and MMB deem.
Thank you. That's a great clarification.
Senator Pratt. Okay, thank you, Senator Pratt. Senator Carlson, I have a question for you, if that would be okay. Okay, you need to get yourself off mute though.
Yes. Okay.
There you go. There you go. So Senator Carlson, when you talked about an emergency, I've heard another area described as an emergency, and that is climate. So will you consider the area of the climate change, whatever that is that I've heard described as an emergency, would you consider that something that the governor could use his emergency powers for, Senator Carlson?
Well, we all have different interpretations of what might be an emergency personally and also nationally. And I don't think that the climate change has been considered an emergency by the President of the United States, where the pandemic has been. So I think the fact that we've had 50 governors be given this emergency powers, I think, is a totally different situation than what might be climate change. Climate change is not the emergency this afternoon, or it's not causing what we have to go through right now. But it is a long-term emergency, and if we fail to recognize that this is an emergency that is coming toward us as fast as possible, then I think perhaps there will be that time when it will be described as an emergency, as for instance, Miami is being flooded and New York could be, and lots of things like that are going to happen. So I don't think it's threatening Minnesota the same as it's threatening some of the coastal areas, but we do need to connect it with these unusual environmental events, and so there is that situation where it could be called an emergency eventually, but it doesn't require this kind of attention every minute of every day. No. And then, the fact of the matter is that we do have the ability, or we have had the ability as a legislature to be involved in the planning for this pandemic emergency. There has been a lot of meetings, but you have to go to the meetings to be able to give your input to them. And unfortunately, the attendees of the meetings have only been one-sided. And so what we need to do is we need to make sure that when we talk about not having a voice in it, that we have occupied the chairs for our voice. And that is important. And unfortunately, that has not happened. And I don't want to go into the, the back and forth about it, but I think that there's been a lot more people involved in this than what we're hearing here in this meeting. And there are open meetings that people can attend, and people can give their impressions and their advice to the people who are in that emergency decision-making process. So I think that there's a lot of things that we can do. And, trying to make them analogous with climate change emergency is really, I don't see that as on the same scale. No.
Thank you, Senator Carlson. I was just trying to get an idea because you mentioned interpretation. And I think that how far does that interpretation go? Because I think the thread of thought here is, if this is an emergency for over a year, if you have emergency powers used for this and that, then if that's interpretation, at what point would you have a governor who could dictate that there are emergencies under his interpretation? And I think that brings us in a very vulnerable place to where the voice of the people, mainly through the legislature, is very important. And I also did make a request on the work groups who did the decision-making to the governor's staff. And what I got back was they were all internal agency members of the work group. I did not see at the time when I requested this that there were outside entities, other things, maybe there were conversations, but I think it is important to realize the best way to get the voice of the people into policymaking is through the legislature. And I get concerned about these interpreting and length of time and so on. I think at some point, there needs to be, the legislature needs to take a look, because maybe next time it will be an emergency in a different governor. And we as the legislature are the ones who establish these policies. So I'll just speak to that. I would say that I have another person on the line here, Senator Pratt. I see.
Madam Chair, I would like to.
Carlson, did you have your hand down or up? I'm not sure.
I put it up again because I wanted to make sure
okay.
that we understood what this emergency is about. There have been more than 6,000 Minnesotans killed in the last year. And we've also, more people have died in this particular pandemic than have died in World War II. So that, if we can't call that an emergency, then we can't call a war an emergency. So this is really a serious situation, and even one of our own members has died as well. So that I think that requires an attitude where it's going to require some important action. Otherwise, we will fail in the next emergency that actually comes up. So thank you for your time.
Sure. Thank you, Senator Carlson. I would say, though, at the point it was declared an emergency and the use of emergency powers were, there as yet had been no deaths. There was a threat and a situation, and we in the legislature acted quickly, as Senator Rosen said. We acted very quickly to take it serious, to respond to it, and pay attention to it, and all of those kinds of things. But where we are at today is much different than where we were at last March. Well, with that, thank you very much, Senator Carlson, but I'll go on to Senator Curran.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I think the classification of emergency, and I think Senator Rosen, thank you for bringing the bill forward. It is a role and responsibility to insert the people's voice back into the decision-making process. We can classify this as an emergency, as some category, but the reality is we're now on the backside of the maintenance piece of what will be required to manage distribution of vaccines and those. But let's not forget the primary responsibility of the Department of Public Safety, Department of Health, and Department of Human Services was to always be prepared for epidemics and pandemics. And what this clearly shows again is if we're not prepared to manage that aspect and operate as usual, which means the entire legislative body thoughtfully and gets together and has the voice of the people, we've proven we can do it. But I'm more concerned that we don't have a plan, and even the vaccine rollout appears to be haphazard at best. And so it's their primary responsibility to always be prepared. In 2009, we had a pandemic. 2010, we're now in 2010, and now that administration, or the leaders in the administration, are it. If they're not prepared now a year later and haven't prepared for the complete rollout of the vaccine and to do everything necessary to manage the backside of this, then they might not be the ones that are prepared to run those organizations. And so it's a primary responsibility. Let's not forget that. It's a primary responsibility every day they serve in those offices. So thank you.
Thank you, Senator Curran. Senator Rosen, I don't see any other hands up at this time, so I'll go to you for closing comments on your bill, Senator Rosen.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to clarify that the only thing the legislature can do is put a pause on these funds right now, currently through the LAC process, which I feel is very antiquated. I'm a little surprised, and I'm going to try to say this gently, but I thought perhaps the minority would want to have a voice here, a strong voice. We, as I said, we appropriate the money. You have no voice in this LAC process as a minority. And all I can do, or the majority leader, or Senator Kiffmeyer, if it's in her budget area, is put a pause on it. And that's all I can do, unless the fund then goes into an appropriation or the regular session is over with. That's all we can do. I feel that's wrong. I feel like we have a strong opinion on how these, and we should be able to provide a very valuable opinion to the governor's office and to these agencies on how these funds should be rolled out, how the vaccinations should roll out. So I don't buy it that we have to be, we've proven that we've been nimble. As Senator Pratt said, we've done some amazing things in the legislature very, very quickly. So with this, I'm just trying to execute our election certificate, our ability to have that voice of the public and talk about what's important and not what's important from the executive branch or a single set of people. I have been there at the meetings, but as I said, all you can do is just say, no, I want more information. That's all you can do. You can't stop the appropriation rolling out. So with that, Madam Chair, I ask for your support. I think this has been an excellent conversation, but I am a little frustrated that we are in session right now and we still have no voice. We have still been minimized like we have been for the entire year.
Thank you, Senator Rosen, for your closing remarks. With that, members will proceed to a vote on Senate File 8. And I'll move Senate File 8 as amended, be recommended to pass, and be referred to the Finance Committee. Please unmute yourselves, members, and be sure you're on camera. All those in favor say aye. Raise your thumbs. Aye.
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 All those opposed, same sign.
No.
No.
Okay. The ayes have it. The bill is adopted and passed, and Senator Rosen on its way to your committee. Thank you, members.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Thank you, members.
Okay. Members, I'm going to present the next bill that I'm chief author of, Senate File 411. So I'll hand the gavel over to Senator Howe.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. And I see you have an author's amendment. So if you'd like to present that author's amendment prior to presenting the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I move Senate File 411, and then I also move the A3 amendment to Senate File 411. It's largely technical amendment, and so it's an author's amendment, Mr. Chair. So I move the A3 amendment to Senate File 411.
So Senator Kiffmeyer moves the A3 amendment to your amendment. Is it, you want to explain the amendment, Senator Kiffmeyer?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It is an author's amendment, largely technical. It fixes a inserting after an insert executive branch state before posting insert initial. Agency is used in this section. It defines it for Minnesota statute section 16A, and it excludes the Minnesota state colleges and universities.
And thank you, Madam Chair. So
Mr. Chair, I move the A3 amendment to Senate File 411.
Thank you. And all those in favor to get this bill in the shape the author would have liked, all those In favor, please signify by saying aye and give the appropriate signal.
All right.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay, with the appropriate signal. Seeing none, the A3 amendment is adopted. Madam Chair, to your
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So Senate File 411, the language of this bill is that if an appropriation as the amendment and the bill describes in that particular way, and by the way, these are only for operations, this is not programs. So only in the agency as defined in this bill for agency operations, not programs. But any FTEs, any positions that have not been filled within 180 days, that is 6 months of the initial posting of the position that goes unfilled, then that money would revert back to the general fund. That is after 6 months, after 180 days from the initial posting. And though these reductions are not made for unfilled positions that require law enforcement training, that are in public safety, or are with the Minnesota State Colleges and universities. Also, the Commissioner of Management and Budget must report to the legislature on the amount of the reductions by agency in a report submitted to the majority and minority leads on the respective budget areas. And so that is what this bill does, Mr. Chair. So
well,
I'd
thank
like to
you,
answer any questions.
Senator Kiffmeyer. Any questions? Senator Carlson.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. And Madam Chair, how frequently has this happened in recent memory, where a position was open for 180 days? What is the dimensions of what we're looking at here?
Senator Kiffmeyer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Senator Carlson. We have not yet received a fiscal note on this particular bill. We're going to move it on to the Finance Committee, but when that fiscal note is ready, this bill will come back to State Government Committee as well. And then we will be able And then we will be able to get more information in regards to that. But the issue is simply, many times we in the legislature fund a position. We fund it and the expectation it's a need. But the fact that they go unfilled for 6 months or 180 days means it is not. And 180 days is a large amount of time to fill a position. We feel that's being very fair. If by that time it will revert back. But the quantities and the numbers we have made, we are looking at some of those requests, but I believe the fiscal note will give us more information that is not available today.
Senator Carlson, follow up?
Oh, and I don't know that what our policy is as far as authorizing a position and posting, and then if there's a subsequent hiring freeze, does your bill allow for that hiring freeze? For instance, if we would do post a position and then a month later put on a hiring freeze, does that increase the time that this position can be open during that freeze? And I know that we do have some policies about that, but I guess I'm concerned that a hiring freeze for economic reasons might cause us to have a problem with that 180 days.
Senator Kiffmeyer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Senator Carlson, first of all, your language was a little bit for the legislature here. This bill affects the executive branch minus law enforcement, public safety, and the Minnesota State Colleges and Universities system. So they are the ones that would decide on putting a hiring freeze on. They also decide how broad, how extensive, those kinds of things. So it is within the control of the governor and those agencies themselves in regards to hiring freezes. We will leave that to them. This is a general policy that this bill would cover.
And so just to follow up,
Senator Carlson, another
does-
follow-up?
Mr. Chair, I'm sorry, Mr. Chair and Senator Kiffmeyer, that this would apply to those executive initiated positions where a hiring freeze might be put on and the 180-day clock would still be activated.
Well, and generally, Mr. Chair, sorry. So, Mr. Chair, generally in regards to that, Senator Carlson, you have to remember again, hiring freezes are under the purview of those executives. They well know about this law that would require those 6 months, 180 days. So, but it is a state law. I think it's good policy. And I think that since this is their power, their ability to put a freeze on or not, and I would suspect if they're doing it in that situation, that we need to put a pause, and this also puts a pause and ends up, if it goes to 6 months, 180 days, that's a very long period of time, even under a hiring freeze. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Senator Clausen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And this is more of a comment. I know that our state has at times some rather unique positions that require unique qualifications. And sometimes our salary is not competitive with the private sector. I know a few years ago, I visited a state hospital in St. Peter. At that time, they had 3 psychiatric positions that had been open for several months and couldn't attract even candidates or find a suitable position. So I'm a little bit concerned about just across I know you've carved out a few positions that this bill you're proposing, Senator Kiffmeyer, doesn't apply, but I think that we have some unique positions around the state that really would be hindered by this bill. So I just wanted to make that comment. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Madam Senator Senator Kiffmeyer.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Senator Clausen, in regards to that, 6 months is a long period of time. It's not a couple months or a few months. And this also, have to remember that the agencies are able to hire as they see fit. And yes, there are some of those situations on those unique ones. And but I do think that after 6 months, if you've posted its initial posting and still do not have it filled, then I think this bill would be a good policy. Revert back to the general fund, and the legislature should look at that report, consider that report, and address those issues as we see fit. Thank you.
So follow up, Senator
Carlson. Follow up.
Or Clausen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You know, there are school superintendency searches that take a year. There are other searches in the private sector that take a considerable amount of time. So again, I think that we would be hindering our state if we were just to set a deadline on hiring some of these positions. So again, thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Kiffmeyer.
Thank you. Yeah, well, Mr. Chair, I just wanted to be clear. The definition for the agencies, so this is executive branch agencies. It does not affect school districts or superintendents. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Kiffmeyer.
Mr. Chair, I was just drawing a parallel comparison, so thank you.
Sure.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator Clausen. So with that, members, I see Senator Curran has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Senator Kiffmeyer, for bringing this bill forward. I think to highlight those few instances which may take longer to hire, I would like to see the same vigor on and work side by side with our colleagues across the aisle to make sure that we remove the barriers or remove the issues that that cause people to leave the employment. Some of those in the corrections facility, we've imposed rules and policies that make it difficult to keep staff from a work conditions perspective. And the reality is these thousands of unfilled positions on an annual basis become the agency slush fund and utilizing those resources on issues that were not directed by the legislature. And they've been a pool. I've been there. I've seen it in firsthand. And so that's what we're getting back to. What do the agencies really need to be funded at? And we'll fund them at those levels. This gets back to it, to if those positions are important, fill them, create conditions to keep the people there. But we've got to have some more fiscal accountability and some transparency for the agencies so we know where those dollars go. Thank you, Senator Kiffmeyer, for bringing this bill forward.
Thank you. And with that, it looks like we have Ms. James would like to make a comment.
Madam Chair and members, especially Madam Chair, I think you are planning on a referral of this bill to one committee, maybe to either Reform or Finance, but I wanted to note that there needs to be work on the definition of the public safety exception. And so that would need to be done in Judiciary. So last year we sent this bill to Judiciary.
Okay.
Senator Kiffmeyer, to that point.
We are going to make a stop first in Finance Committee because we need to get the fiscal note. And going into Finance Committee will help us get that fiscal note, and we will certainly go to Judiciary for review and discussion with them about the language of the amendment.
Well, thank you for that clarification. And with that, members, if you can, all those in favor of Senate File 411 as amended, be passed and referred to the Finance Committee. All those in favor signify by saying aye and give me a hand signal.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign.
No.
No.
With that, members, the bill is passed and on its way to the Finance Committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And with that, members, I appreciate Senator Howe taking the chair for the committee. With this bill being passed on to the Finance Committee, we now have completed our agenda, and we will continue to have regular meetings on Tuesday and Wednesday. Please stay tuned for the schedule. And with that, members, we are adjourned.